Up into the Zoom, right?
Good evening, everyone. Calling the meeting to order. Welcome to the Land Use Landmarks and Planning Committee meeting of CB11M. My name is Jason Villanueva, and I am the chair of the committee. This meeting is being called to order at 6:36 p.m. Tonight, we are joined by Angel Biscayne, the staff liaison to our committee. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. CB11 members, if you have a question about board business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. Members should not engage in a back and forth discussion. The chair will recognize the next person who speaks. The chat relevant to Zoom should not be used for CB11 business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record when recognized. Please keep your questions and comments brief and on topic to the discussion. Members of the public, if you have a question or comment about the subjects on the agenda, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. We'll now call the roll call.
Members, when I call your name, please answer present. Adem Briha, absent. Kenneth Crouch.
Present.
Jessica Elliott.
Present.
Pascal Hanu. Jewel Jones.
Here.
Nelsa Orama.
Present.
Beverly Pavon.
Present.
Derek Stampone.
Present.
Penny Torres is absent. Jason Villanueva.
Present.
Candy Vivas Vasquez is absent. We have quorum.
Excellent. Okay, moving on to the adoption of the agenda. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and was posted online. If there's no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. Committee members, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand to be recognized. Awesome. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. Adoption of the meeting minutes. The meeting minutes from our last meeting were distributed to committee members ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt the minutes from that meeting. Committee members, if you object to adopting the minutes, you may raise your hand to be recognized. Excellent. Seeing no objection, the minutes from the last meeting are adopted. The minutes of tonight's meeting are being taken to be done and performed on time by Mr. Kenneth Crouch. Announcements.
I did you.
I got probably two announcements. One is there's an FDR walkthrough that seems to be coordinated. I don't know necessarily by what group. It has to do with this.
CB6.
Yeah, with the politics of trying to get money for the astronaut and all that good stuff. I'll send the information to committee members. It's an open invitation. I don't necessarily, it's been a fight that some of us senior members have been doing for a while, so I'd love to see us to continue that effort. I don't know what. The other announcement is more of new business. Anyone else? Excellent. Moving on. Informational updates, same as the announcement. Now we'll move on to presentations and discussions. Presentation and discussion will discuss land use applications that are written out on your agenda for MTA, 125th Street, and Lexington rezoning. The above listed application was certified by the Department of City Planning. The period for community board members review begins on May 28th and must be completed. Just to explain simplistic process, this is another, we've had the pre-ULIP discussion last month. To date, I've received no questions or concerns or outcries. So you have another month, right? And then next month, we'll sit down, we'll resolve. I know George brought up some issues. I brought up some issues. We'll continue to address those concerns as it relates to zoning and more importantly, housing. And yeah. Is our presenter ready?
There's no presentation, just discussion. We had a presentation last month.
Excellent.
George is going to speak on the application for us.
No problem. Thank you.
But I'm sorry, before we get started, we did invite the MTA and they are present to answer any questions that may come up after George's presentation. And we thank them for appearing today.
Thank you, Joe and team.
Okay, can I share my screen?
Yes, sir.
All right, so the rezoning application, you all saw it last month. It's primarily rezoning the Pathmark site to this new C611 district, and it would result in this building here, a 40-story, 15 FAR building on the western side of the site, 684 units, roughly 25% of those units would be permanently income restricted, 75% would be market rate. Over 500 units. The proposal would rezone the C44D to C611. And again, but a C611, there aren't any. Created these in December. And so this would, I think, would be one of the first, if not the first, C611. Oh, sorry. There we go. Okay. So what does this mean in terms of bulk in this area? So what we have here on the left is what the current zoning allows, and then what the proposed zoning allows on the right. So right now, the residential FAR can get up to 7.2. Actually, the total FAR can get up to 7.2 with all the bonuses, and the proposed zoning can get up to 15. So essentially, it allows development double the size on this block. The base height increases, the building height also increases. You could do towers on the C611 site, which is an unlimited height, but there are practical limits to the height here, which we'll talk about in a minute. The action also rezones lot 27, which is the site to the east, and also lot 33, which is the firehouse. And lot 27 was approved for the building below, and this application may or may not, the applicant may or may not revise their proposal for this. There are some advantages for them to use it. There are some disadvantages for them to use it. It's unclear to me whether they're going to, it's not a no-brainer, I guess is what I'm saying. And so in the environmental assessment for the action, they actually studied both buildings being developed, meaning lot 20 and lot 27, which is what they should do, right? It's the reasonable worst case development scenario is that both of them happen. On the left is what their expectation is in terms of the reasonable worst case development scenario. On the right is what they're showing as the maximum building envelope, which they're saying is approximately 550 feet. I think that's a little generous because I don't think they can get that high. And the reason is that this is a map that we got a while ago during the neighborhood planning process. And what this tells us is building heights according to restrictions on flight paths to LaGuardia Airport. And it's hard to read this, but it shows you increasing levels of building height. And I marked the site here, and it's between 400 and 450 feet as the maximum building height, if this is still current. And I checked with Jose, he thought it was still current, but this is not zoning, right? This is FAA type stuff, right? And so because it is not zoning, this would include bulkheads, right? So normally we just measure height up to the roof, but this would be the total building height would limited somewhere between 400 and 450 feet. And they're estimating building height to the roof at 405 feet. So it's relatively consistent with this. The environmental assessment has these kind of photo simulations showing this is what would be allowed under current zoning. This is what would be allowed under the proposed zoning. You can't see the tops of the buildings because the buildings are outside the frame of the photograph. Again, the maximum building height, 145 feet, with a base height of 105 feet, would go up. Both of them would go up with the proposed rezoning. Sorry. My computer decides to be unresponsive. There it goes. Okay. Sorry, it was remembering. Okay, all right. The zoning also makes small changes to the existing Park Avenue Hub subdistrict, which is, all right, so the major development is over here on the Pathmark site. there are little tweaks being made to this special sub-district that was mapped in 2017 as a part of the neighborhood East Harlem corridors rezoning. The base height is increased from 85 feet to 125 feet, which is the same as what is proposed. The maximum base height is increased. And then the minimum non-residential floor area is decreased by 0.5 FAR. And I can explain this because I remember. The idea here was that they wanted this to be kind of at least a little bit of a business center in this area around the Park Avenue station. And they wanted to have at least 2 FAR of non-residential floor area. And now, in 2017, that's what we said. And now in 2025, we say, well, why do that when you could turn that into housing? And so priorities have shifted. And so they're moving some of the non-residential floor area into residential floor area. So it's really a tweak. It doesn't really change the bulk in any material way. They do show the development sites, 1, 2. 1 is where their main building is. 2 is might happen with the neighboring site, and then 3 and 4, which we know these sites. And it shows us what the effect on 3 and 4 would be. It's not very much. You gain a little bit of housing, both market rate and affordable. And then, on the other side, you lose some non-residential floor area when that gets converted from one to the other. Okay, so in sum, the proposal, I think, is a fairly straightforward upzoning to facilitate housing development. More than doubles the FAR in the district that was upzoned in 2018 or 2008, right? So that C44D was mapped as part of the East Harlem 125th Street rezoning. And although it's an unlimited height district, you do have a practical height limit of about 400 feet. It should be noted, I think, because this public land in East Harlem is almost always done at 100% affordable housing. This is not. This is 25% affordable housing. The rest would be developed at market rate. And then finally, the tweaks to the zoning district on Park Avenue that was mapped in 2017. So that's the proposal. I'd like to spend a few minutes talking a little bit more about planning in 125th Street and just bringing back some, all this brought back these memories from 5 years ago. Because 5 years ago, this committee spent some time looking at the future of 125th Street. And I pulled out a couple of slides from that time. So East 125th Street has had several planning and zoning efforts over the past 15 years. And I list a bunch of them. And then we showed this again 5 years ago. This is the 125th Street corridor from 123rd to 127th. And this is existing. And this is what could happen with all the development is realized as the zoning permits, right? It's a major change here. And at the time, we observed that the current zoning is a hodgepodge without any uniform form. And there's not really a consistent regulatory vision for 125th Street. East to west, and I will actually do it over here. East to west, we have, I didn't even count the M22 district. So M11, M12, R72, C63, C44D. Now we're going to have a C611, back to a C64, to a C47, back to a C44D, then a C44A, mapped in 10 different zoning actions over the years, right? So this is like a patchwork that has been put together with different zoning efforts. And the question that we asked at the time was, would this area benefit from a comprehensive vision for the corridor? And I'm going to ask you all to think about this, is could the MTA improvements here new station, right? You know, a big station that's happening here, be a catalyst for a unified plan for this area. I'm not saying that it should be, I'm just asking the question, right? And, you know, you all live in this area and you are on 125th Street here, and I bet you think, well, you know, this could be the street could be better, right? And so this is existing. This is the possible future that I pulled from the work that we did 5 years ago, and then we threw in the plan for that, and we'll do that again. There's a lot of change coming one way or another here, and we've been saying that for many years now. We know that the Durst site over here has been vacant, you know, for 20 years. But, you know, vacant sites do have a way of attracting development, right? And then a couple final thoughts. Additionally, the city stated that this proposal is part of the Manhattan Plan. From the press release, they said proposals like the one at East 125th Street and Lexington Avenue will be crucial to Mayor Adams' Manhattan Plan. The Manhattan Plan aims to add over 100,000 new units of housing to the borough over the next 10 years. But the details of the Manhattan Plan aren't available. Public engagement is scheduled to start this June. But, you know, you have to make a recommendation on the application in front of you, right? This is the application you have in front of you. Even if you wanted to study a unified plan for 125th Street or evaluate the Manhattan Plan, that's not going to happen, right? You have to make a recommendation. But, you know, something for you all to think about is to, you know, advocate or ask for a plan as a part of your recommendation. You know, like say, this is a one-off, you know, to do this, but you might want to be thinking about something more unified here. You know, I'm going to say this just as I think it's a fact, but maybe it's an opinion of mine, but piecemeal zoning that facilitates individual projects, even if they're good projects that you want, will never meet the potential of this corridor, right? A big crosstown street with a lot of history behind it. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the application.
Thank you, George. Any questions? Elliot.
So first, you mentioned that it would be the first publicly owned site in our neighborhood, that it's as part of the mandatory inclusionary housing. Our expectation as a community board is that what is left of city-owned land is going to be developed as 100% affordable housing. How is it possible that they would be able to?
Well, okay, so the ECF project at 96th Street is not 100% affordable because they're using that site to build 3 new schools, right? And so instead of 100% affordable, there are other issues that came into play. I think in terms of the programming of the site as market rate, you have to ask the MTA about that. I mean, they took this property. It was, you know, it was part of an action, or they bought this property, I guess is proper terminology, and they have their own plans for it. So I think that's a question for them.
Yeah, and they're a public-private entity. I guess to follow up on Jessica's statement, and something that we should look into is when they did the transfer of the land, right? It was Pathmark, which was a private entity per se, right?
I think Pathmark had already sold it to the developer of the lot 27, and then it was sold from lot 27 to the MTA. And the MTA is, you know, it's a state agency, so it's technically state-owned.
Okay. Yes. What, in your opinion, was the determination for a C611 versus some other similar, like a C610 that has some height restriction on it?
You know, I think what they're trying to do is maximize development. I mean, that's what the city invented these new zoning districts to take advantage of the fact that the the FAR cap was lifted in the multiple dwelling law. So that state law was changed, and that if you have affordable housing in the building, some affordable housing in the building, you can now exceed 12 FAR. And so they're looking for places where they can take advantage of this new zoning tool. And it does produce a lot of units. Produces a lot of, 684 units is a lot of units. And so if it's lower density, then it would produce fewer units. And I think, honestly, I think it's as simple as that, but you can ask the MTA.
Which the MTA is on. Joe, can you answer some of these questions that we're concerned with the zoning and the intention behind some of the efforts that are being performed by MTA and where our council is with this project?
Sure.
Would you like me to jump in? It's Paul here.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I was going to tell Chair Villanueva, we are joined by members of our TOD group tonight. So we have, John Kirshner, who is a planner with our TOD group, and Paul Januszewski, who is a VP and project executive for our TOD group. So, I play one on TV. These guys are the real experts. So I just want to turn it over to them to, and Paul's already willingly jumped in. So I'm not putting him on the spot. So Paul, if you wanted to take this one.
Sure, thanks.
So,
and
there was a few questions.
thanks.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, what was that? I didn't know if I was supposed to hear that. Anyway, I'll answer some of the, let's see if my I'll answer some of the questions or issues that were raised. First of all, regarding the height, I do want to clarify. So the height limit is really not a zoning limit, but as was mentioned, it's related to the flight path towards LaGuardia. The estimates that were cited, I think, are correct. We're assuming it could go to approximately 400 feet. However, the zoning does allow that, zoning allows you to go to the BSA to get a waiver from that height limit if FAA is accepting of it. So we did do some studies of what height we think could be acceptable to the FAA. And this is an analysis, it's laid out in the zoning regulations, but it's there's an analysis that can be done, how far you are from the runways. And we have reason to believe through this analysis that the FAA may accept up to 550 feet. So we were trying to be the most conservative in our analysis and assuming that the developer may be able to get a waiver to go up to 550 feet. Doesn't mean that that's what they're going to do here. There's advantages to staying lower. Costs get more expensive when you exceed 500 feet. But just to be more conservative, we think there's an ability for a developer to go higher than 400 feet here. As a community, you'd want to balance the pluses and minuses of a higher tower that allows more light through at lower levels versus a shorter, more squat building, which doesn't go as high, but maybe bulkier at the base. So given that this is still, there's no developer for this building, no one has looked at it yet. These are possibilities. So 550 is sort of the highest example of what could possibly be approved here. Regarding the building next door, our understanding is that developer, and we're not, a party to their decision making. We have some coordination since this is being done over the 2nd Avenue subway stop, but our understanding is that it's more advantageous that they were grandfathered under the old 421A, and that they're going to be going ahead under the existing zoning, even though there would be benefits to this additional bulk, that the benefits they'd be getting under the old 420A, 420 grandfathering would be more beneficial to us. So we've heard that they're going ahead with that plan. To be the most conservative analysis for the worst case scenario, we're assuming that it would proceed under this rezoned proposal. And I think the fact that this is going ahead may have gotten them to consider going under the rezoning if it's successful, but our understanding so far has been that they're proceeding with a much smaller building. Regarding the issue of publicly owned property, 100% affordability, I just don't want to distinguish us from the city. We are a public agency, the MTA, but our bylines, our bylaws, and we're a state agency, require us to, our mission is public transit. It's not building affordable housing. So we have, obviously we support affordable housing, but our bylaws require us put any, profit that we can get off of these sites into mass transit, not into public housing. So there are instances where we have worked in coordination with HPD or other city agencies to provide subsidies that would allow for more than 25%. We don't do that as the MTA. We would just follow whatever the zoning requirements are. In this case, we're assuming it would be, we would map mandatory inclusionary housing. The council member generally determines what alternative under MIH. Councilmember Ayala has suggested that she'd like, I believe it's options 1 or 3, which are 25%, or a 20% option at a lower AMI, 40% AMI. Those are her suggestions. You're perfectly willing to try to communicate with her office and state your interests. But the MTA on its own would never do a 100% affordable project. We just wouldn't be able to do that under our existing bylaws without some additional subsidy from HPD or from the city if that was the desire. Regarding the commercial requirement, one thing correctly, there's much more emphasis on housing now, creating as much housing as possible. I think the mayor's Manhattan plan will be looking into, where can these higher density districts go? But given that that's still going to be a ways off, this is seen as sort of an obvious choice, given that it will be over a new 2nd Avenue subway station, over, the Lex, the 4 and the 5 lines, connected to Metro North running down Park Avenue. If there was a good location for density and transit-oriented development, this is one, where you would have all this housing density over all of these mass transit connections. I think the city supports this and has said, this is an ideal spot for transit-oriented development. But I think, they're still a ways off from taking a broader look. And I don't disagree that a broader look at 125th Street comprehensively would probably be a good thing. But this seems like the most obvious choice for this, given all the public transit that it's, directly on top of. I think the city will be wanting to look at this area for more housing density. But meanwhile, we have a separate situation here where we're building the 2nd Avenue subway construction is proceeding now. We need to know our construction of the 2nd Avenue subway will also be the foundation for the tower that's built here. So we really need to know now what density of tower we're building for, what will our construction support. So that's part of the need to go ahead with this in advance of any future plans, comprehensive plans for the neighborhood. So that's sort of quickly addressing some issues I heard, but you're willing, you can shoot out any more if you'd like. Myself or John is actually much more involved in the details than I am, but he can also pipe in. And the other issue I just wanted to raise was that this site was not rezoned as part of the previous rezoning because I think there was a desire to keep the Pathmark grocery store. And so this was not rezoned as part of that East Harlem rezoning in an effort to not make it a site attractive to redevelopment. I think the community wanted to keep Pathmark. However, even despite of that, the Pathmark did go out of business shortly after this. And so it's been an empty site for some time now.
I will amend that a little bit because 125th Street was largely left out of the neighborhood plan and the rezoning because it was rezoned in 2008, right? And so that wasn't, it was 9 years previous. And except for the area right around Park Avenue, where there was a different vision for that area, right around the four corners around there, really that whole corridor, the 125th Street corridor was left out because the rezoning that had happened there was still relatively fresh in people's minds.
Jessica.
If I could just re-ask my question, Paul, I just was curious why the specific C611 was selected versus another similarly dense FAR that has a height restriction.
I think it's just that this seems like an ideal location for, you know, this. We initially did come forth with a lower density. It was an R10, but then there was a City of Yes passed. There was the, you know, the changes to the multiple dwelling law to allow larger residential buildings. We had discussions with city planning. I think they feel that this is an ideal location for one of these new C6 districts. It would result in more housing. There's a big, you know, effort now to create more housing in Manhattan, and so this seemed like a good location for that.
Hi, this is John. I can turn on my camera. Hi, I'm John Kirshner, MTA TOD. I just also want to clarify that there are not similar density districts, to my knowledge, that have height limits. Like most large sites that are R9 or higher have these tower regulations that wouldn't have height limits. So even under the R10, like the bulk envelope or the size you're seeing on the screen of the buildings is actually quite similar between the R10 and the R11. And they would both be under tower regulations and be effectively limited by that 400-foot FAA height limit.
You could put you could make this an R10A and have a height limit, or it's a special district, so you could put a special district height limit in it, right? It's a special zoning district, so you could just put whatever height limit you wanted on it. It's not a mechanism of zoning.
Thank you. Following up on the affordable housing. Was the FMA with HPD and the other city agencies by the MTA to see if we could get a 100% affordable building? Because it sounds like, from what the statement was stated earlier, it sounds like that did not happen.
That has not happened because, again, our mission at the MTA is to maximize the profit we can get from this for mass transit, to put it into mass transit.
Yeah, Jason, I think we talked about this when we first presented as well, too. You know, part of the understanding here, at least, you know, on the MTA's front here, is we're looking from our end to maximize the value, you know, of the location and the site that we've purchased, because, you know, we envision this being, you know, helping us pay for Second Avenue subway for phase 2 as well. You know, part of this is going to help us generate, you know, dollars to help pay for the project. So.
Understood. So how does that help the district? Because I get what it does for the MTA, which we gave you a lot. We're giving you a lot of land. What are you doing for the CB11?
Well, we're building the Second Avenue subway. I mean, that is, I think, going to be a benefit to the district. This is going to be, you know, a great intermodal location where you're linking all these subways together. I think it makes sense. I think that, you know, makes sense to have the density right over the subway station.
No, sir, Derek and Beverly.
Hello. I've been in this community all my life. And I want to thank you for, you made it sound almost like you're doing this community a favor by giving us the Second Avenue subway that had been planned by 30 years ago and for whatever reason it was not funded because for many factors. And many people have different reasons why. My question is that right now you have 25% units in a community that continues to build and gets displaced. And I understand that that's not your mission, but it is certainly our mission to ask the question. And so the fact that we voice concerns and that hadn't even been spoken about, to find out how some of those concerns could be alleviated is a little troubling. And I can speak from that because I am a housing ambassador. And so I do New York City Housing Connect applications, which I'm assuming these 171 units will go through. And I can tell you that there's tens of thousands of applicants from the city looking for affordable units. And what is market rate, which may change based on the project, which will put a lot of people who are already housing insecure in trouble. So, I would prefer the next time if we voice a concern, that even if it's outside your wheelhouse, that people that can help or assist or answer a question is included. Because frankly, 513 people who can pay market rate apartments, that's great to maximize your bottom dollar, but it may not be great for those who are looking for apartments that they can afford, especially since our area median income is tapped into other communities which artificially inflated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nilsa.
Yeah, you want to respond, MTA?
Well, I mean, I thank Nilsa for her comment, but I'll defer obviously to the experts on the thinking between the breakdown between the affordable and the market rate units and how we arrived at that formula, if you will. But
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying. We are limited on what we can do without some city involvement. Which we can continue to have discussions with them, but I know there's no affordable housing required now if the site is not rezoned. And this would be bringing at least 171 affordable units.
yeah, I just think you should also underscore that point that those conversations, continue to be had with the deputy speaker and her office as well as the community board. I know when we spoke last time, Chair Villanueva, you were, very outspoken in the fact that you will continue to fight for as much, affordable housing as possible and want to make sure that we're considering as much as possible. I don't think that conversation starts at 100% for a number of the reasons why Paul enumerated already, but that conversation can still be had. Where we ultimately land, this is what the proposal is now. Where we ultimately land, remains to be seen.
And we'll continue the discussion, because as you mentioned, Joe, when you did the prelude, we did forewarn that that's going to be a big challenge for not only this committee, this community. I would like for you guys to look at the financing of the project and see if there's anything that you can come to terms with to be able to have discussions, because, from what we understood way back when, congestion pricing, tolls, all these other expenses that our constituents, including members from this district, are coming out of pocket to pay for the MTA's upgrades, not necessarily just for the Second Avenue subway. And when we're told in East Harlem that the Second Avenue subway benefits East Harlem, the MTA, as you said, is a state agency that serves all 5 boroughs. So, we're aware. I just think we should have a more coordinated discussion as you go through the ULA, right? We're still going to make our recommendations by next month, but I think that it should be a continued discussion of how MTA can maximize affordable housing in this project. Angel?
Understood.
And Joe and team, a question, at some point, post this rezoning in the future, this site will be RFP'd by MTA to identify a developer, correct?
Yes, correct.
And in that RFP, could the intention of the committee to have more affordability, deeper affordability, be included in that RFP? So when submissions are, or proposals are being submitted, they're proposing, more units, and this will understandably require more public subsidy that's not coming from the MTA, that'll be coming from HPD. But could the committees, the issues that are being raised by the committee be incorporated, or will they be incorporated potentially into the language of the RFP that will be issued at some point in the future to identify those developers?
They could be. I mean, I should clarify the schedule here. This is still quite a ways off because we have to build the Second Avenue subway first. So we're several years away from issuing an RFP. But yes, we could do that. Like if there was a subsidy identified by HPD for the project, and we worked out some agreement with them, we could, put those requirements into an RFP.
Great.
It's a great recommendation, Angel. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
I'm sorry, Derek, then Beverly.
I have a question for George.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that it's possible, right, that the C611 may be like the first or one of the first.
Yeah.
What do you think the impact would be if this goes through and a building like this is built here? Do you see more C611 coming to East Harlem as a result of this and this possibly being successful?
Yes. I mean, so when developers or either the city or private developers come in, they very often look at what's around and they look for the context. And if this gets rezoned as it is proposed, it becomes the context. Now, what they were saying is absolutely true. This is right on top of the subway station, right? But you have a C44D across the street on three sides, right? And so that becomes the intersection. And so those sites around it become essentially they become target sites for redevelopment. And that's why I was trying to get at the whole idea of planning for the corridor and planning for change instead of just responding to applicants, one at a time as they come in and extending this kind of patchwork quilt. And, you all may find that, right on top of the subway, right next to the Park Avenue Metro North station, like you should have super dense there. It should be, Grand Central North, but it should be the kind of thing that happens all at once and planned, with the community to develop a vision for this area, as opposed to private applicants coming in saying, well, they're doing it across the street. like I don't know. It's the way that a lot of places plan, and it certainly is best practices.
Thank you.
Beverly.
Yeah, George, my question is in regards to the amount of units that they say 645 units.
684 units.
84 units. Is this based on the height that we were talking about?
It's more based on the floor area, right? So what they've done is they've taken a floor area ratio of 15. There's some retail, some commercial component in the bottom of the building. They're taking that out. And so that you have residential floor area, and they're making some assumptions regarding the unit size, and they're coming up with that number. The actual number may be a little different up or down, depending on how it all gets laid out. But that's what it's based upon, the amount of floor area, not the height.
Okay.
Beverly, then Nelson. I'm sorry, Beverly.
Oh, I just asked them.
My brain is. Joe Jones.
And I'm like,
Oh my
there's
God.
something.
I'm sorry.
To your point about the, concentrated effort or comprehensive effort, with the advent of the bid, 125
right.
bid, So that's an opportunity for us all in terms of this more like futuristic kind of approach
Yeah.
in terms of 125th Street. So I think we should, make sure that we, are in conjunction or, with those folks in terms of the bid, and which is a great thing.
No,
We don't think that's-
Yeah.
Bid?
There are
Okay,
different
so,
over there.
yeah, okay, so just in terms of that, just want to throw that out there in terms of that.
I'll have discussions with the Echo Chair,
Yeah.
land use about it. No, sir. Executive.
The environmental assessment for that lot, is that available?
Yes.
And if so, so then we can just look for it on our own because.
I got it on my computer. I can
Great,
get it. I'll email it.
just because I'm concerned about all the potential, like I understand about density, but it always seems that East Harlem never has any negative impacts on any projects. So we're the best place here because nothing ever phases us and you can build whatever you want and it will not impact us. And so I think of shadows and I think of potentialities, especially along 125th that already has some inherited problems. So I'm glad that that'll be available so that we can read it and form questions.
Right, so it has an environmental assessment, not an environmental
That's an
impact
impact
statement,
statement.
because there are no significant adverse impacts because of this project.
Not very.
Any other questions? Eric?
I'm curious about like knowing that area, walking on that sidewalk there. Like, George, like, what are your thoughts about like the setback and like the proximity between like the building star and like that sidewalk? Because if I'm thinking of it, like what it's like in like Midtown and like,
Yeah, right.
that the size of those streets and the size of those sidewalks.
So one of the things they do, I mean, this is why planning is like, especially for very high density build, this is midtown density, right? We don't have this kind of density on the Upper East Side or other place in East Harlem, right? This is midtown density. And one of the things they do there is they have these things they call sidewalk widenings, which means that you have to push your building in at least 5 feet so that you give that 5 feet of private space, your own land, to the sidewalk. So you have more capacity for the sidewalk. And there's going to be a lot of people coming here for this.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be appropriate to have some sort of mandatory, and now, of course, you end up with a taller building because that floor area needs to go somewhere, right? But when you're dealing with, honestly, the difference between a 400 and 500 foot building, it's not much, right? It's because it's an extremely tall building, and extremely tall buildings, once they get up to a certain height, they're just like freaking tall. And so would it be better to have a taller building and a wider sidewalk to handle the capacity on the sidewalks for all the people that are going to the station? This is the kind of thing that should be thought about during this.
And for my own sake, like what is the mechanism of that? Is that part of the zoning?
Yeah.
Is
That's part of zoning, or it can also be part of an RFP,
okay?
right? That comes later. You could write that into the RFP as a limitation.
So like C611 doesn't require, that wouldn't be the thing that required.
No, it would be
Yeah.
part of, so right now, the way this is written, it's part of a special district, right? And so you could write the rules you want into your special district. It might be easier to do something like this as part of an RFP, but really the place to do it is part of the larger planning study, right? If you're planning for very high densities, you might want to have mechanisms like that.
Thank you.
George, thank you. Always informative.
Just to follow up on that, but wouldn't the, how the MTA is gonna make their station also gonna impact that sidewalk thing? Because
My understanding is that it's in the building,
Yeah, it's like
But-
a big open.
but the thing is that you're still gonna have a lot of people walking to it, right?
Right.
They're not putting it on the sidewalk like the Lexington Avenue line.
Yeah, so in the image you're seeing on the screen, on the MTA building, which is the U-shaped building closer to us on the left, the gray area on the first floor at the corner, that is all going to be glass, and that will be the entrance to the Second Avenue subway, and there will be I don't know, maybe at least eight doors on each side, on each face. And then also, just so you know, across the street, there's another development that's happening separate from the MTA, but using a zoning, using the special transit land use district, which is a zoning district that was written for the 2nd Avenue subway a while ago. We are relocating the sidewalk stair, or that is currently on that side of Lexington Avenue, to go more into the building. So it should free up the other side of the street a little bit more.
That's good.
Any other questions? General discussion?
So I still am curious about the impact on the other lot, right? And I understand, like you said, it's not a no-brainer to use it, but if this gets rezoned, it's rezoned until it gets changed.
Yeah.
And while it may be a brand new building, like who knows, like what could happen, what could fall through. And so I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but it's a very different situation if it's just the MTA lot versus like that entire block.
Yeah.
I don't know if that changes what we would say or what we can do, but it does feel like it's like relevant, and to just say, oh, we think the other people are just gonna do what they're currently say they're gonna do, like that just feels like I would want a little bit more certainty perhaps on what they're thinking of doing.
So I'm just pointing out, in the environmental assessment, they have projected development site 2, which is that site. And so they're figuring that without the rezoning, it's at 599 units. But with the rezoning, it's at 804 units, an increase of about 205.
And also on the inclusionary housing, like currently, the application we saw is an inclusionary housing application that would yield a number of affordable units, but they're term limited, right? Essentially.
Yes,
For a certain
right.
amount of time.
They're not
And
permanent.
if they were to scrap the project that they presented to us and start over with a new project facilitated by this rezoning, should it be approved, then they would be subject to mandatory inclusionary housing, and then whatever affordable units we got out of that would be permanently affordable.
Right.
So that's something for them to be weighing.
Yeah.
Right. And without speaking to them specifically, like the MTA could only essentially guess what they're going to do. The only people that can actually say fully what they're going to do is those developers. So we should talk to them.
They presented in the past.
They did. They presented
Yeah,
to us
they were here in December with us when we presented on this initially. So, and I also know that city planning is interested and may have already spoken with them as well too. So
I believe so has City Council Land Use, Paris Strader.
Yeah, and just to remind everyone, they came in for a fresh bonus for a grocery store, and so they're going up to 160 feet because they got the fresh bonus and they were able to add another 15 feet. So they've invested a fair amount to get to this point. So it's not a no-brainer that they're going to do this. Meaning, like, I could see them just. This is a very affordable building form. When you start getting up to 400 or 500 feet, it starts getting very expensive, and it's hard to support affordable housing in those buildings. This is much more economical. So again, it's not a no-brainer. I don't know what they're going to do.
Good question though. Jessica.
Apologies that I missed last month. I did speed watch it, and I just want to refresh my memory on. We're also talking about 33, which is the firehouse.
Yes.
And then we're also talking about those 2 other areas along.
No blocking on.
Along Park Avenue?
Along Park Avenue, yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Are the ones along Park Avenue similarly a C611?
No.
Okay.
No. So it's just tweaking the Park Avenue stuff. The underlying zoning stays the same. It's just the mix of non-residential to residential and the base height.
Okay, great. And then why wouldn't we consider 33, even though it's the firehouse currently, to be something that could be later developed similarly to 27?
The footprint is so small.
That's all by the city.
Well, it's being used, right? It's the firehouse that's being used, and there's no plans to. So I mean, it could be redeveloped at some point in the future as a piece of public property, but they didn't identify it as one of the reasonable worst case development scenario sites because it is being used as an institutional public use.
Right. And sorry, just one more question. How is this not spot zoning?
Well, spot zoning involves one owner,
One
right?
owner.
And this is multiple owners. And if they had just done the MTA site, you could argue that it was spot zoning, but even then, it's a public site and the city does that sort of stuff for publicly owned properties. It's not, yeah, it is spot zoning and you could make an argument, but you'd probably lose. But if it was just that one site, but this is multiple owners, so you certainly would lose.
Also,
I remember.
Oh,
Go ahead.
sorry. Just to answer, I think one of the previous questions, the Park Avenue area is currently zoned as R10.
Yeah, well, C64. R10 equivalent.
That's great.
Oh, yeah, in regards
You
to
have a
lot
question,
20
Beverly?
yes, in regards to 27, I remember I was looking when we were doing the rezoning for that, they had included lot 20, and I put that, now I'm thinking, we should have left it alone.
Gotta deal with the heavy system.
Yes, right?
All right, is there any other questions relevant to this application? Concerns, comments? Great discussion.
Just one more question, sorry, about the Manhattan plan.
Oh.
You said that's, the details about that are supposed to be available this month?
Well, they're starting their, or at least what I've heard, they're starting their outreach this month. Jose, you might want to talk about it if
I'd love to
she's.
learn more.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so for the Manhattan plan, essentially, it is in development and there will be further outreach going on all the way up to the month of September. I know we have already met with some members of the community board last week, especially community board leaders, district managers, and chairs have, being invited to kick off community engagement, but we plan to do more outreach on that. One ask that was, or a takeaway from that meeting was to ask people of the community board if they can refer events where public engagement might be effective, so we can, try to table or attend those events when they come.
I have a little information sheet that they discussed at that meeting. I'll make certain you get it.
Okay, it just feels like it's like late in this election cycle, and it's hard to imagine what is going to come of it, knowing where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
You're right, the next traffic.
No.
No, sir.
I know that this committee will probably think of places that you can go for outreach. Have you thought of any places that you could go for outreach in terms of getting more community involvement besides, let's say, a community board meeting and tabling? Because I know that on our website, on the CB11 website, all the events are listed for the summertime, and it tells you the days and times, and that might be a starting point for you, so you wouldn't have to wait for recommendations from us. That might be a way for you to start your planning, because it's been my experience that we don't always get as many people weighing in. You only have sometimes a community board and a handful of community members, so it would be great if you start thinking about all those events that have already started and will go in through September, and maybe that can start your initial outreach, especially for the Manhattan project, because it always seems that East Harlem always falls a victim, and I use that word I'm trying, and I don't mean to make it sound as strong as it sounds, but we always find ourselves at the back end of stuff, and we find out about projects and then not always benefit us, and by the time we weigh in, we can only get minute changes. And so I think that if you really want to hear community involvement or build towards an event where you can get as much as much people participating, then that's where I would first start at looking at all the events in this community that you could potentially table at. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Thank you for your thank you, George, for your presentation. Thank you, MTA, for being present for our questions and concerns. I know you heard our concerns, DCP. Please start coordinating with HPD, and let's continue.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks
thank you
for
folks
having
for
us.
having
Always
us.
appreciate it, and we'll always continue to have dialogue. So thank you.
And just to confirm, we're going to be back next Tuesday, right? Presenting to the whole committee. Is that right?
To the full board.
Perfect. All right.
Yes.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good call.
Before we jump into what are we talking about next? Charter. Just back to the point of what the idea that George was raising about 125th Street. There exist layers of different rules and ideas impacting development on 125th Street, which is not the full reason why 125th is pockmarked, but it certainly contributes to it. There are a lot of limitations. One limitation, as an example, not the only one, is the urban renewal plan that was discussed by the community whenever years ago and reflects the input of the community at that point. Subsequently, time has passed and things change and evolve, yet those restrictions from that plan are in place and in part contributes to some of the lack of development along that corridor. Fact is, we saw a project, what was it, 2017, right? The ECF project that, had all these community givebacks and all this blah, blah, blah. And then the most recent updates we got was that, now the project is too expensive, right? It's the same thing on 125th Street. To develop a project within all the different layers of rules on 125th Street are very restrictive, costs and rules included. So this idea of beginning to think about what could 125th Street look like should also include what will it take to get to that vision of 125th Street. And that conversation needs to be done as, in my opinion, proactively, so that we're not in the position of then being reactive and saying, again, well, no one spoke to us about this one idea. No one not everyone is required to come and ask for our favor to do what they have to do. However, if we're being proactive and laying out a vision that's reflective of today, right? Then when they want to do their thing as a right within the rules, they're within the rules that we've laid out. And that's a conversation that needs to be engaged. This was brought up, a few years ago, didn't really get any traction here. I encourage you again. I was reminded last week by Chris Cirillo that we're coming up on the 10th anniversary of the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan. I won't take any credit. George has said many times, maybe the community board should consider taking another look, making new recommendations, maybe tweaks. And so the end of your name is planning. So I would encourage you to pick that piece of your name up and start thinking about what can 125th Street look like. The East 125th Street development, 2nd to 3rd Avenue, 125 to 127 is stalled. Less than half of that is built. Since my records show, I was not here, but the records that I've read, 2006, there was a task force. That's a long time ago, right? And who knows how much further back it went from that, but that's what I've read back to. Now the Pathmark site was seeing, but the Durst sites, formerly the Tornado site, the Lee building, what used to be Modell's. If I own the Modell's building and this goes through, the next day I'm putting in my plan. Because now I can just, go to work. So just, I wanted to jump in with George to further encourage the committee. It doesn't have to be figured out tonight, but perhaps commit tonight to start that dialogue.
Well, as chair, I always appreciate the recommendations from our members, especially our staff and land use. We'll keep a standing agenda item for that, if that works out. I would ask those especially experienced, Nilsa, Angel, George, maybe Jewel, I think you were around with this neighborhood plan and all this stuff. I knew at the time, the district had a speaker at city council that was able to coordinate and make things happen.
Yeah.
My youthful question, again, not something that we'll figure out today, is how do we do the same thing in 2025, right? Because I know there's always, when I first took on this committee, there was a concern of the points of agreement. But as we're dealing with projects, as we're moving forward, I'm just trying to figure out, I guess a good process or forum to start having those discussions. In the past, members have brought up concerns, particularly with planning. Like I got an email the other day about the hospitals and there's the corridor and so I'm just thinking out loud. Since we did it with land use, we did it with landmarks, I would like to do it with planning, respectively. And I will lead on our members to start coordinating that effort so then that way we can come up with something strategically as opposed to having a discussion for the next year or two.
Yeah, right.
And make some action how to happen out of it. A lot of that was a question. Just like to figure out how we could do that again. Maybe we can look at what they did in the past.
So sorry, I'm gonna jump in here.
That's fine.
So I don't know about 2008, I was in a different world, but I was here for 2016. And the fact is, speaker or no speaker, a lot of communities have done planning exercises successfully without having the speaker. Like not everybody gets a speaker. That certainly helped. But it doesn't necessarily require the speaker. We should be working in conjunction with council members for sure and whatever other partners. But in 2016, it started because we started it.
Yes, that's right.
That was it.
It'll stand in our agenda.
And it started before that because we started it at the zoning task force. And that's how we met Homeboy.
Got it. So homeboy, we need to hear more.
So it's just like, it really is as simple as members wanting to do it. Like we had a few members at the time on that task force that were very, very motivated to do it.
Yeah.
So they just kept, started, and then we got to a place, and then we had to wait a year or two for a new administration, and then we kicked into the next place, which ended up being the neighborhood plan phase thing. But it was very much kicked off out of this office.
Got it.
It wasn't like somebody came and said, "Hey, come along." No, as a matter of fact, we were excluded. There was an attempt to exclude us.
You're motivating.
And we were not gonna allow that. So we and then went in and just took the shit over.
I see, Derek. It's general discussion. We don't have to be too formal.
So
Only if we get out of order.
So my question, it kind of builds off of that. So like we could sit around this table, we could pull out a map of, let's say we want to do this 125th Street thing from 5th to the river.
Yep.
And we come up and we say, this is what it looks like. This is what we think the zoning should be. And we do that. What would the next steps be?
Work with DCP.
Okay.
Like bring them in as early as you can. We're thinking of this, we're thinking of that. They'll counsel, he'll counsel, other people will counsel.
And specifically,
then you're not in competition.
Mhm.
If you end up kind of pointing in the same general direction, then that they help move things along.
because I'm thinking specific, like that part you brought up about there are very many good ideas that get layered on top of one another, and then you end up creating expectations around a project that makes it impossible to do.
Yeah.
Or you're building one affordable housing unit, and that's $1 million to build that one part. So like that idea of peel it all back and start with nothing and say like, what are the priorities? Because if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's like, what is it? What would that part look like to say, imagine there's no zoning there at all.
Yeah.
And you were gonna do it from nothing to get our goal. I think succinctly, we would say what? 100% affordable housing.
Yeah.
If that would be our dream. Yeah, we care about other things, about what the building looks like and how, like those things matter.
Yeah.
But our number one thing is 100% affordable housing. We know we don't always get that. We know all the reasons why we
No,
don't.
and you won't.
But we won't. But what could we do to make it so that a person who wants to build on a piece of land is motivated to do as much affordable housing as possible?
It's not complicated. It's the money and whether
Sure.
the numbers add up. That's it, right? So that's where the reality of business and the wish of a community kind of clash. That's why you can't have 100% affordable all over the place. It's just,
No.
it's always an expectation of community folks. It can't happen.
Correct.
Because stuff is expensive and it keeps being expensive. So when we did the neighborhood plan, we, and other folks too, throughout the city, like it wasn't unique to us, said, okay, well, on the public sites, on the city sites that you already own, it's free to the city, it's $1, right, to sell for. Well, then those maximize, instead of doing these 80/20s or mixes, then do them 100% affordable, right? Because then the developer's getting it for cheaper. So then the numbers work a little better. It's still hard, right? Candy can attest, very hard. If it's a private site, like, for example, the southwest corner of 125 Park, right? The Durst owned it most recently. That's been there forever and ever and ever.
That's a dream,
right?
That's a dream. To have
So
something built there.
many years ago, when I started here, a couple years after that, somebody purchased it. They purchased it for a hell of a lot of money. Then Durst bought it from them for even more money. That's never going to be an affordable building.
Of course.
Right? There's no way they have to recoup. So that's we have to walk into it with that understanding. But then there are pieces, there are things that the city and the government makes available to projects to help stem some of it. So you get from absolutely no affordable to one affordable, 2, 3, 4, whatever it is. But that has to be subsidized, right? It's just like public housing. There's no subsidies, no public housing, right? Period. Right? There's no fairy godmother. So we have to look at, I would say, look at what we want generally along the corridor. So residential, commercial, whatever. And then identify more specific things. And then we have to get down to the negotiation table. Well, we have to look at what the reality is, right? Like what's privately owned versus what's publicly owned. And then try to negotiate, stuff like I said before with the RFP. That's where you can kind of move it. Like they're not gonna budge and they shouldn't budge because their priority is their priority.
Right.
That's it. They're not bad for it. That's their job. However, there are tools potentially available from the city that could be applied to this. And a place where that could happen is at the RFP stage, right? Because they're not going to develop it. They're gonna find someone to develop it. But in that, they're gonna get proposals. So they could say, these are our priorities. We're gonna look more favorably on
If you have
submissions like this, right? That incorporate things that were said at the state or wherever. And then that could be the way that we get it done, but it won't be the MTA part. It'll be that, ABC construction, whoever gets it, in 10 years.
Andrew, to that point, is it possible that, like, example given, MTA owns the slot, they're gonna do this, can the RFP go through HPD, or they stay away from each other as?
No, it's not them, it'll be the MTA.
MTA.
Yeah.
But
And then they're gonna sell it to the developer.
Right.
And then the developer would have to go to HPD per se,
But then the building permits and all that jazz, but then HPD gets into the equation on,
Financing.
potential,
Finance.
helping with financing and stuff.
So can they require things if they get financing through
So in
HPD?
exchange for the
Right.
financing, definitely. Yeah, that's the way that works. I give you $1, give me a unit.
Yeah.
So
Otherwise you get no dollar.
So in terms of preparation for this project that is way overdue, I remember
Yeah.
because of all the different layers and all the different zonings and stuff, can George start picking apart what we need to look at? Because we can go when we have our recommendations and stuff, but knowing like what blocks are affected by block, what I'm trying to say is the different zonings that hit the different areas in 125th, and we're looking to see how we can make it more efficient, right? We need like, we can have all the ideas in the world, but understanding, right, what's
Yeah.
there, so that we have a baseline document where we can read that will help establish.
So I'll say this before George was talking.
Mhm.
I would approach it,
Or forget
with-
it all.
no.
Okay,
Dream,
okay,
and then concurrently, look at what the rules that apply to the area you're dreaming about are. And then on this block, I would like to see this, and then this rule applies to that block. Like the urban renewal applies not the whole area, right? Like it kind of like snakes and portions.
Yeah.
So it may affect this building, but not that building. So then you look after you get your dream. And I say that because this is the way I think. I don't want to get discouraged before I'm finished dreaming. I want to dream first and then be realistic and like, okay, so I can do this on this. And with the layers of stuff, I mention those because something that should also be considered is perhaps making recommendations to changes to those rules.
no, I
Right?
agree, because,
Amending an urban renewal plan, amending a rezoning, amending a special district. And that'll be informed by the dream.
okay, because I was thinking about it like the urban renewal plan that
Yeah.
has some restrictions.
There's
If we should
lots.
Right, if we should know about those restrictions first, so that we have an eye up to what, let's say we have to, like I remember for the multi-service center, there was a lot of charrettes done, and
Yeah.
a lot of
Oh, yeah.
planning, and I remember for the East Harlem neighborhood plan, I even remember going to Children's Aid and being part of that.
Mhm.
And so, the community informs, but the community, is not as informed as it should be,
So
and the same thing with us.
the community should never be expected to be
the
George.
expert, right,
The
Well,
community
we
should be
should.
expected to be us,
exactly.
right? You dream. Like, what was it we used to do with participatory budgeting? People were like, oh, confused, and it's too many words, too many syllables. I'm like, that's not your problem. Your problem is, tell me what your wish list is. I need a new boiler at Johnson. I need a new window at such and such. Like, fine. And then we throw it on the list, right? And then we start talking through the feasibility of all that. And eventually you're gonna get to the subject matter expert, right? For example, NYCHA, tons of stuff at participatory budgeting with NYCHA. And NYCHA won't take $1 if you give it to them, because they're impossible. But we didn't know that. But I didn't wanna dissuade people, because you have a room full of 100 people from East Harlem, and you're asking them for ideas, 70 of those people are gonna be from NYCHA. So you're not gonna be like, well, we're not gonna do NYCHA questions, and they're gonna storm out. So you wanna catch all the ideas and then figure it out. So, that's your question. Yeah. Okay.
No, yeah, because I was, the way my mind works, I'm like, okay, so in terms of planning, like, should we know what the obstacles are?
Yeah.
And then if, let's say, like, Jessica's good with everything, right? So, but if Jessica is a good planner, she can help, present like a certain group, help us understand. And then the dreamers, let's say like Derek and Beverly.
Yeah, you could do it at the same time.
You know what I mean? And it would all be simultaneous, but people would be
Yeah,
guided by that.
we ended up meeting George, right? I just saw Ethel the other day.
Oh, is that right?
We met Ethel and George, in 2012.
Yeah.
2012.
Yeah.
Because we RFP'd to get land use consultants for our rezoning being proposed. That scared me. I got kicked off here. Being proposed by our zoning task force here, right? So that was after the committee had done all the streaming stuff,
Okay.
right? And we met at Cologne one night. We had a bunch of seniors yelling at us about stuff and bowling alleys and all. Yeah, they were like, "Well, we used to be here that you want to see," and we threw it all in there. And then we had Lucian Reynolds, who was our planning fellow. He did a soft site, but he was a student. And we got to a really good point, but then there's a point where you have to, then stuff. So that's when we met these guys. So I'm always gonna argue for the do the brainstorming part first, and then you can we have him here, we have her here, we have him here, and we could start. Oh, this rule applies. This rule applies. But I wouldn't want to box anybody, we can't
Because
do
of the
anything
rules
because
first.
my cousin participated in the urban renewal plan 40 years ago and she
No.
loved it and we can't. I'm like,
That
no
cousin-
disrespect to
that
your cousin, but
cousin
it's
Big
today.
change, big
So
change.
today we gotta,
It's got to evolve.
yeah, okay, I'm shut up. No, that was it. I'm just gonna repeat myself. I was about to repeat myself.
We got no time for that.
We have, nobody got time for that. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm talking.
There's no need to apologize. I love communication. I can listen to you guys all day. But needless to say, yes, I agree wholeheartedly with Angel, and we're gonna initiate that effort, because one thing I do function as is a project manager, so my project manager brain, which I think we all share, is to initiate the project,
Yep.
which is planning, no different than what this committee did 2 years ago with landmarks. We'll be in conversation, right? I don't just do these meetings. I know July, we're meeting this year in July and not breaking because of this project, so that being said.
No, go ahead,
Okay.
finish. I have something about July.
Because then coming September, right, you have August to think, brainstorm, and we'll come in September and have everybody at the table. DCP, design, what, we can invite everyone. The same effort that we did with the landmarks, to me, we could do with planning, and they could be there while we're planning. And we'll continue that effort. Yes, Angel?
Thank you for saying July. You guys gotta schedule a meeting for July.
Right.
Because you gotta vote. So second, we always do second Tuesday, so second Tuesday would be 9.
Second Tuesday was.
Yeah, second Wednesday, thank you, Pepper. We're voting at full board on the 29th, so if you wanted to do a week later, if you wanted to think about it a little longer, that's also fine.
I'm sorry, say it one more time, second.
So second Wednesday, I misspoke. Second Wednesday
The 9th?
is the 9th. And then I said that full board won't meet though, until the 29th.
Okay.
So if you wanted to do land use a week later, maybe the 16th, that also works.
Any objections to the 9th? Only because I won't be in the country on the week of the 16th. Doesn't matter, it's not personal. We can still have the meeting, right? We have vice chairs, we have other staff, so I'm just making it open that, if you don't want the 9th, you want the 16th, speak now.
I like the idea of continuing the second Wednesday,
Yeah, agree.
because people are used to the second Wednesday of
That
every.
works for everybody?
Thank you, folks.
So we will meet July 9th. And I definitely will not want to be here for MTA.
It's George's night.
It's okay. I'm not saying anything adversarial. I tend to be diplomatic when I want to be. I am interested though, and no, sir, if you can start thinking about what you did as chair many moons ago with what was going on with the corridor and this funding for the district. I don't hear about it no more. And I remember people coming and presenting to the board, and my interest isn't for that existing pot, though we should figure out a way, or I don't know if the chair now deals with that, or bringing it up at full board to everybody. But what I would like to think of is how to strategically plan bringing those concepts to all developers that come to the table. You see what MTA did? Every time I speak give backs, I think you've all been here, the constant rebuttal is the project is a give back. So if it's not MTA with the service, it's the private developers with opportunities, right? And needless to say, we live in a capitalist society, so there is no discriminatory practice of saying that you can only use CB. I'm using a bunch of words to say, it's like giving apartments to CB11 people only. Right? Everyone says they're gonna do that, but then legally they can't, or they'll commit to it so they can get opposition. I just think it's healthy to figure out a way to really push on developers for investing into the community a little bit more outside of just their project boundary. I know the bid is trying to make that effort, so what Jules brought it up, but it's something that I think, the point is we're talking it out. I hear a lot of planning, to Angel's point, so I do think, Angel, If it's okay, we just keep it as a standing agenda item, so we can keep traction with planning. Yes, Derek?
I think something that feels important is like, you feel like some of these big projects come in and it's like people move here to like go to that new, great building, whatever, but it's not important whether they were in the community before or not in the community before, but like, are they now becoming a part of the community? Are they not just living here and spending all of their time in business outside? Like, are they investing? Are they bringing business here? Are they doing things to revitalize East Harlem more than just using it as a place to park themselves? Right? And so, but that is not just gonna happen on its own. And I feel like a lot of what we do here is about these big, but I get it because that's what ULURP is asking us to do. But there's other types of development that could be going on in the district that would like grow those things, right? Where you have vibrant communities where it's not just a place to sleep, right? That there are places to go to eat and experience the culture and like do all of those things. And that's like your cross committee collaboration, right? Like it's more than just building stuff here, right? We need more than just houses, we need homes, right? People need to be integrated and a part of this community. And then that supports it all, right? So I think that's, again, more of the stuff that we can be doing and will be doing.
No, sir?
I agree with you because I actually know of developments that have been in East Harlem for 10 years and the people don't really interact, even though there's a certain number of affordable housing in there, and actually get bothered because they hear loud music, different culture, culture clashes. And so that's what I say. But my question is, or a suggestion, Chair, is that during this presentation, they alluded to it last month, and it was again alluded to this month, where they had a conversation with the Deputy Speaker Ayala regarding this project, and she has some suggestions. Now, I know that the Deputy Speaker has not come in person that I can remember. I know that she's participated on phone, but considering that we are taking a position and have questions, it would be interesting if maybe she can come and explain her thoughts on the project. And, and not that we need buy-in from the Deputy Speaker or, Melissa Mark-Viverito, but they have history. And if we're looking to move forward, it would be nice to be able to pick someone's brain and let them know that we intend to take this seriously, because we're tired of being a hodgepodge and a ground where we're the experimental place, and we have to come up with reasons to tell our constituents why they can't afford to live here and why they're still in shelters after 5 years, even though they work and can't afford an apartment. I'm just saying. With that, I'm gonna go drink some more.
Well said. So we'll table that, as we discussed moving forward for our efforts in September. But again, let's continue the conversations as the summer arrives. And moving on to our next presentation by Mr. James.
All right. This is about the charter revision commissions. Chair, if this is going on too long, you need me to speed it up, you feel free to push it along. There's a lot of information here, and there's a deck, there's a lot of things to read, but I'm gonna try to quickly go through it. So there are actually 2 charter revision commissions, and you form these, the charter revision commissions when you want to change the rules of the game. And the charter is essentially how the city operates. It's the rule book for city operations, and ULURP is detailed in the charter. If you want to make material changes to ULURP, you got to have a charter revision commission. The charter revision commission is formed to develop recommendations to changes to the charter, and they're going to appear, if they come up with them, on the November 2025 ballot. So this is very timely. And why are they doing this? The real estate and housing interests want to streamline the land use process to make it faster and more predictable. And there's concern that the current land use process emphasizes local goals over citywide needs. And it's all happening right now. Preliminary reports have been released. And both the commissions have released a report. So the city council has their commission and the mayor has his commission. But under state law, if the mayor's commission proposes changes to the charter, the council's commission cannot propose changes on the same ballot. So as a result, we're gonna focus in on the mayor's commission. However, there are some really interesting things in the council's commission that I am gonna talk about briefly. All right, and I will, there it is, okay. Okay, so the charter revision is about more than land use. You have elections and voter turnout, procurement and payments. I'm just gonna stick to the land use components. Okay. So they've had a whole bunch of hearings, and what they would do is they would invite experts to come and testify. They went first and they were given more time. The people who testified and the kind of testimony that they gave, it was largely repeated back into the Charter Revision Commission preliminary report. You are not going to find in this preliminary report a list of suggestions that are going to be on the language on the ballot. Essentially, it's reporting back what they heard, and a lot of, this is a problem because of X, Y, and Z reasons, and there are many different ways to solve it. Additional hearings have been scheduled. The last one in Manhattan is July 7th. And then I would expect ballot recommendations to come in the month following, shortly after.
Sorry, July 7th is very close to here. It's at the Schaumburg.
Yeah, it's really close. Yep. Okay, to remind everyone, this is Euler. We're not gonna go through it. Okay, the preliminary report is, again, it doesn't have these specific recommendations, but it has like these 7 buckets, and these are largely things that this is what I'm calling them. So fast tracking ULURP, roles within the land use review process, categories of projects requiring ULURP, the zoning administrator, which we're going to talk about, comprehensive planning, fair housing, and the capital plan, member deference, and then modernizing the city map. Sorry, my computer is, there we go. Okay, so fast tracking, we're going to go through each one of these. Fast tracking ULURP. So ULURPs. Mayor's Commission discusses possible changes to ULURP to reduce process costs and to facilitate certain types of development. It introduces this idea of different levels of review. Large projects taking one path, smaller projects taking another path. And the idea is that there have only been a few small residential rezonings, where there's small increases. So whenever you see a residential rezoning, it's normally 100% larger. And they're saying, well, if we had a different path for small rezonings, you might see more of them. It also suggests streamlining the review for categorically beneficial projects like 100% affordable housing. But what makes a project categorically beneficial? Is it just affordable housing? It's actually unclear. It's just says that there should be a different category or different process for those types of projects. Mm-hmm. And then, a question I had is, can't local review and ULURP make even categorically beneficial projects better, right? You make projects better even if they're already good. Okay, fast tracking, continuing this. As a part of fast tracking, it introduces this concept of a zoning administrator. As a mechanism to review projects that qualify for fast track treatment, projects that are small, crucial, or categorically beneficial might go to the zoning administrator. And it also suggests a different review procedure for housing developments in districts that fail to meet their fair housing targets. Fair housing targets, what is that? Okay, so there are 2 fair housing efforts going on right now, one by the administration, one by city council. And the fair housing framework, which will be published by city council, will have housing targets by community district that community districts are going to be expected to meet. And so The idea is that if you're not meeting your housing target, well, then maybe there'll be ways to speed up housing development in your district. Okay, number 2, roles within the land use review process. The commissions are looking at amending the roles played in the process, including enhancing or otherwise changing the role of the borough president and or the speaker of the city council. So think about the role that the borough president has now. There's been some talk about elevating that role and elevating the role of the speaker of the city council. Consolidating the advisory portions of ULURP from 90 days to 60 days. Right now you have the borough president going after the community board. Sometimes, what about having them go together at the same time? There's some stuff on office space acquisition, moving it from the CPC to controller's office, which is a council recommendation. The news, we're going to talk about the zoning administrator later. Now, and this is important because it does not really suggest changing the community board's role in projects that still qualify for you. You'll still see the projects first, right? You'll still see land use projects first. You'll still have your 60 days. But really the question is what qualifies for you? All right, the categories of projects requiring you, and that may change. So you may not see, if this all passes, then you may not see what you see now. Projects that qualify for you, I think, is where we're going to see most likely to see significant changes. The report suggests a new process for zoning changes related to climate and infrastructure, and another process for public land. So the quote, it says, ULURP's one-size-fits-all procedure forces the city to spend scarce time and resources on exceedingly modest changes. It's true that, they all have to follow the same procedure. Some city properties are tiny, sometimes inches wide, a few square feet, and to dispose of them, the city needs to go through ULURP. It's not like a car where they could just dispose of the asset. You have to go through the process. And then there's a recommendation to streamline disposition to activate public land for affordable housing or other uses. This is a map that I made for a different project some years ago, where all these tiny little red dots, these are all publicly owned parcels, most of which are too small for even a multiple dwelling, less than 1,800 square feet. They're tiny scraps. And the city, and amazingly, the city hasn't taken property for back taxes since 1997, but it still owns hundreds of these parcels. These are the little ones, and also, some big ones which it uses. But even if they want to get rid of these tiny little parcels, sell it to the neighbor, they have to go through ULURP. And so there is something to be said for looking to streamline some of these actions. All right, the zoning administrator office, I want to talk about a little bit. So the zoning administrator actually was a part of the 1961 zoning recommendations, but they were never adopted. It's actually an office that's commonly found in other jurisdictions but the powers that the zoning administrator has vary widely. I actually pulled this from the archives of the American Planning Association discussing the zoning administrator from 1967. So it's a very old concept, and they're talking about adopting it here in New York City. And the commission described the idea that certain zoning changes would not have a full ULURP, but would instead go to the zoning administrator office. These actions might include smaller developments of up to 6 units, 35 feet in height. Other small changes or variances, maybe commercial overlays or parking requirement changes. And so the zoning administrator's office is this entirely new mechanism, replacing some land use actions and perhaps some BSA, Board of Standards and Appeal actions. And the report has no detail on how this role would impact public input on these actions. Like, would you still see the applications? Even though they're small, you see everything now. Would you still see those applications? I don't know. And would the zoning administrator hold hearings? Sometimes it's a small change, but if you live right next door, would you have an opportunity to comment on it? I don't know. It's not in there. Anyway, so the zoning administrator, I think, is a fairly big deal, but there's not a lot of details on it. Number 5 is comprehensive planning, fair housing, and the 10-year capital plan. So the Mayor's Commission does include language on elevating citywide needs in land use process, which suggests identifying what those needs are through a planning process, right? You know, you have to have a plan to actually identify the citywide needs. It discusses the possibility of a comprehensive plan by discussing language, testimony by Lander and Reynoso, who both advocated for a comprehensive plan, but doesn't dismiss it, but it really couches it in very careful language, right? It's not saying that they're going to do a comprehensive plan, but it does discuss the idea of fair share for housing using models from other jurisdictions. Suggests that the charter's capital planning process is going to need to change, because right now the capital planning process does not meet well with infrastructure, transportation, and neighborhood amenities that happen because of rezonings, right? So you create a new neighborhood, Long Island City gets transformed from an industrial area to a residential area. That means there's going to be massive capital requirements there, and the capital planning process does not really fit well into that. And instead, we do it through points of agreement, which is not ideal. Now, I'm going to spend a little time talking about the council's report here, because it had some really interesting ideas regarding the comprehensive planning, fair housing, and the 10-year capital plan. And so the recommendations build upon this new fair housing framework that they're developing, and they're exploring new 197A community planning rules, and to require DCP to create or assist with 197A plans. And the reason that's great, 197A plans, is you're new, you probably don't even know what they are, right? They were written into the charter, and a whole bunch of community boards developed local land use plans called 197A plans, which essentially got adopted by the city and essentially guided development, zoning actions within the community district, within the area. And it, you know, they were some were adopted, and some are still on the books, but we haven't adopted a new one, I think, since 2008 or 2006. And essentially the administration is basically, well, I don't know, they're very expensive to do. There's a lot of hurdles into doing them. But I mean, you all are now talking about doing a corridor plan for 125th Street. The idea that city council is saying is that the city should be supporting that effort. The city should be supporting those local planning efforts. And if they do, and you develop it, it becomes policy, right? And it will guide future land use actions in the area. And so you don't necessarily have to just deal with applications as they come in. You have a plan guiding development. And it would require, I mean, they're thinking about this creatively, requiring agencies to incorporate fair housing and housing targets into the planning process. So you'd have to be thinking about fair housing as you're developing these corridor plans. Anyway, it's a really nice idea. And they're also thinking about increasing the number of votes the City Planning Commission needs to approve applications that are disapproved by the community board and the borough president. So the idea there is like they approve things that everybody disapproves, right? And so the idea is well, if you're going to do that, at least have a supermajority, right? I think that's a kind of logical thing, right? And while none of these ideas will be on the November ballot, they may appear in 2026. So it's not necessarily they are going to develop them into actual recommendations that they will be hoping to get on the 2026 ballot.
Nice.
Okay, so number 6 out of 7, member deference. So the Mayor's Commission identifies member deference. Everybody knows what I mean when I say that? Yeah, okay. As a barrier to development in certain areas, and balancing citywide needs versus local priorities, right? And as member deference, it's a convention, right? It has nothing to do with the charter, right? It's not in the charter, but they spend pages, like they spend 4 pages talking about what a big problem it is, right? And so what can they do? You can't actually do anything. But to me, reading in between the lines, this is just me now, there are these vague suggestions as to changing the role of the city council speaker and the borough president. And if you elevate the role of the speaker, you may be undermining the role of the local council member. And I was at another community board meeting where there was a council member who had been council member under Peter Ballone. And she was like, well, when Peter Ballone was speaker, there was no member deference. And they actually acknowledged the fact that it was different when there was a different kind of structure to city council where you had long-term serving speakers who had been around for years and years, which we don't have anymore. Okay, number 7 is modernizing the city map. So this is the city map. The city map is, it has curb elevations, street widths. It identifies, what's a street, what's not a street. And this is a ULURP action. If somebody wants to make a change to the city map, it comes before you and you have to vote on it. If you want to raise the curb elevations because of flood prevention, it's a ULURP action. It comes before you. And it's also different by borough. It's controlled by the borough president's offices as opposed to DCP. And the idea is centralizing its management to DCP and digitizing them citywide, which I think would be a great thing as somebody who uses the city map. I know it's easier in Manhattan because at least they have the PDFs online. In other places, you actually got to go down to the borough president's office and pull them. It's like, it's okay, right? It's kind of 20th century. Let me just say it that way.
You can go 18th century.
Yeah. And here's a question: is should all city map changes be ULURP actions? Right? Do you want to know if somebody's changing a curb elevation by 3 feet? Do you want to weigh in on that? I don't know.
Not necessarily.
Okay, I have some commentary. So these are just my own thoughts on this. There's a focus on ULURP time, but ULURP time is small compared to pre-ULURP time. Yeah, right. When you get an application, it's been in the works for years, and the pre-ULURP time is not dictated by the charter, right? So the commission is focusing on acknowledges that pre-ULURP is an issue, but they don't control it. So they're focusing on ULURP. So if you change ULURP, you're not going to considerably change the timeline of projects because most of it, 80% of it is pre-ULURP, and you can't change that. So you're talking about the 20% over here. I don't know. Planning sometimes takes time, and so I don't know. To me, it's yeah. And further, I'm going to say this: is that some comments are so general that they are inaccurate, and I'm going to read one to you. So today, ULURP frequently requires the same costly multi-year process of environmental and land use review for a new 8-unit apartment building as for an 800-unit apartment building. As such,
That can't be right.
ULURP applications tend to be for big changes rather than small ones. Okay, you've seen tiny ULURP applications. This one on 2nd Avenue here was extending the commercial overlay 45 feet. That's all it did. And the application was this big. It was tiny. It was very small. I wrote this one, right? Me personally, I wrote this one on the Lincoln Square Special District. Like it was expanding a special district part of one block. It happens. This was one on 124th Street to change the parking requirement in the special district along 125th Street. And it went away when City of Yes changed and we didn't have to change parking requirements anymore. And the report suggests that tiny actions cost the same as large actions. They don't. They absolutely don't. The timing sometimes takes long, but the cost is not as high. There's no discussion of increasing review time for very large projects. Neighborhood rezonings get the same amount of time as an extension of that commercial overlay, right? And City of Yes for housing opportunity, it was non-ULURP, but still followed the ULURP timeline. 1,386 pages of zoning text in 60 days. Yeah, you know, that was ridiculous. That was, I don't mind, Jose, that was ridiculous. That was too much and too little time. The commission's focus on speeding up the process, especially small projects. But what about large projects that need more time? There's nothing in there about that, right? The mayor's report, I think, this is again editorializing, shows little appreciation for how projects can improve because of the local input during the process, right? That's why we do it. You do this to make certain projects hope that projects get better. There's this discussion of member deference. You know, I just think that there's going to be some recommendation to hope to weaken member deference. But you know, who knows whether that could be successful or not. There's this focus on impediments for small projects. City of Yes for housing opportunity largely eliminates this issue in the R1 through R5 districts. And you know, I asked the question: is this focus on small projects really still necessary? And then I think there's a big questions on understanding the zoning administrator's role, its powers. If applications to the zoning administrator will still go to the community board, I mean, that's going to be critical in understanding if you're undermining your own, you know, your own power here.
We elect you, George, for zoning.
And then Chair, I have a few questions here that I came up with. If I were sitting in your shoes, that I would ask. So what changes could help you, community board, do your job better, right? This is really not a topic of discussion in the mayor's report. So would there be changes in the charter that you would like to see them so you could be more effective at your job? Yes. I think about that. Do you have opinion regarding projects that qualify for community board review? What do you want to see that you're not seeing? What don't you need to see?
Transit easements.
What's that?
Transit easements.
Transit easements. You don't need to see transit easements, all right? Would it be okay for some ULURP actions to skip the CB, right? What about city council? Transit easements. What about timelines? Do you have enough time to do your job now? What about the roles within the ULURP process? If the borough president had a bigger or smaller role, would that be okay? Do you feel strongly about concurrent reviews? Is it okay would it be okay if the borough president went at the same time as the community board? I think that the borough president's recommendation is informed by the community board recommendation, and there's a reason for it to be sequential like that, but you may not have the same feeling. Some changes could diminish the role of council, city council. Would that be okay? The commission's focus is on zoning over planning, and the council's commission is really suggesting the reworking of 197A plans and comprehensive planning and getting DCP involved in planning with the community boards, right? And should comprehensive planning be part of the charter? And does the 197A process need to be reworked? Okay, and then finally, what's next? Hearing July 7th. Consider written testimony on both the mayor and the council commissions. Consider developing resolutions on your thoughts and concerns. And then after the ballot proposals are out, the community board can consider community education. You can't take a position, I don't think, but you can tell people what they would do and what they would do to the land use process and the public input in the process. That's it. I know that was a lot. I'm sorry.
Also, how many? Elliot, Derek, and then Candy.
Just a question, knowing that they're not going to be the timelines in either bucket, city council or mayor, obviously mayor wins for this election cycle. We would theoretically have until next summer not this summer, to participate in public hearings or provide a resolution, because that's when they would finalize for the November election in 2027.
Yes, but I will tell you this, is that I was in communication with the council commission, and essentially they're gonna shut down in November or this fall. So they're going to develop their recommendations and then shut down. So I'm not sure they're gonna be hearing in next. So if you have opinions about that, put it in now, before they shut down.
And when is the deadline, I guess, for?
That is later. They started later. I will find out.
Okay.
For you. I have a contact there. I will find out when you should have your written comments to them.
But the mayor's commission is for this ballot now in November, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I give you the order.
Okay.
Elliot, Derek, and then Candy.
Elliot, you're good? Elliot?
Yes.
Okay. I know you, George, thank you for that. I know you said that there is not ballot proposal language yet.
No.
Do you think that, because it seemed like some of the things got us like really excited, right? Like that super majority to override. It's
That won't be in a ballot proposal because that is a council.
Sure, but I guess my question is like, is this something where it would be like, here's all of the proposed changes around Euler, and you're voting yes or no on all of it? Or do you think some of it would be broken down and into separate pieces?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm going to speculate that it's going to be broken down into pieces. Like there'll be buckets. One dealing with process, probably another dealing with items, and then, but I don't know. I don't know.
Thank you.
So, the community board putting in input, is it too late to even ask that whole suggestion that yes, we should be able to, if you could go back to that part of where the discussion, where we're at right now. No, right there with the community. I think that, can that be incorporated, or is it too late for us to?
No, they're still holding hearings.
The truth is just that we sit here hours in presentation, debating, even trying to kill each other just to make sure that we're shaping the landscape.
In the
of
nicest way
community.
possible.
You know what I mean? And then the next thing you know, we say no, we say yeah, and then they do whatever.
Yeah.
And so we're sitting here, our free time, because we care what we do in fashion.
Yeah.
I like to see that being incorporated if it be possible.
Yeah, again, there is a hearing that's being held on July 7th. You can submit written comments at any time. They're taking them right now online. You could do that yourself personally. The board can do a resolution and put it in themselves. They've already selected like 400 written comments from all types of groups. So yeah, you can and should do that. Absolutely. And you should do it for both the mayor's commission and council, and you should do it separately.
One more question, sorry. It's okay. One more question, just because what you just said. Have there been, in your knowledge, any other community boards who have already provided testimony that we can refer to?
Community Board 8 in Manhattan has.
Okay.
Community, they've already submitted. I know that Community Board 3 is working on something. I was just there on Monday. And, I know that they looked at the Community Board 8 stuff, but I also know that the Community Board 8, they have a lot of stuff that they, like on landmarks and stuff like that, which are not part of the charter.
Right.
So just don't take it as
It's not
gospel.
helpful
All right.
all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Very vocal.
Yeah.
There have been several citywide that have submitted testimony.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for that presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
I like it.
You're incredible.
Obviously, Angel will have a copy.
Yeah. If I may, on this question of member deference and community board plans and 197As and comprehensive planning and all this stuff, there's a lot of effort put into informing plans and making suggestions. 197 exists. The problem with 197 is not that it exists and not what community boards have submitted, it's how much they're being respected by the administrations, right? How much are they actually keeping to what community boards are submitting? That's the issue. Like, there has to be more weight there. I, Angel, would argue that if you want to speed up development, you have more as of right stuff. And if you have a community plan and that projects are being held to that plan, then that would speed you up. You're being held up as a developer because you're proposing something that's completely out of skew. And then you have to work through and negotiate that all with the city to even get before the community board. But if there's already a plan saying that on this block, we want this particular thing, and then you're proposing something that abides to that thing, then it's essentially an as of right thing. It's per the rules, per the will of the community, right? And that would save your pre-ULURP time, right? But, God forbid they had common sense, and instead what the proposals is reducing the ULURP time. I'm like George rightfully said, that's not where your delay is. It's not, the community board is not where your delay is. Your delay is prior to that. And okay, you've invested a lot of money, it's expensive, blah, blah, blah. Understood. Well, then figure out ways to kind of get around that, to not get around it, but like figure out ways to work in that space more productively, more responsively. Responsive is what I wanted to say, but I don't know what the rest of the word is. That's more responsive to the wills of the community.
Yeah.
Right. And then you don't have as many delays. You just, as of right, like how many ULURPs have we seen since the neighborhood plan got approved? Not that many, because most of the projects that are happening are as of right per what we said in the rezoning.
Or they're for dispositions that are in the plan.
Yeah. So like that's a way around it. And then this member deference thing, I participated in that panel thing like last week or the week before. And I was asked a question about member deference and I foolishly answered. And I said, I'm like, it just takes courage, the hell with the other 50 members. If the goal of the city, if the public benefit is to build more, like the tagline for the city of Yes was a little bit and everywhere nonsense. And then in some neighborhoods, they just kind of retreated because those neighborhoods were not going to accept it. So they've done some, but it's a trickle. I would argue, and I argued then, that it should be that so it's 51 council members, the other 50 members should be responsible if that one member is just out of pocket, right? For whatever their own personal reasons or selfish reasons are opposing this project, not because it's the will of the community, not because it's to the benefit of the borough or God forbid the city, but because of their own selfish reasons, political, economic, whatever their reasons are, then the other 50 already have the right to override them. They don't have to defer. They're choosing to defer. Well, I would argue be brave in those instances. And I don't want to slander council members. I think that most of the time the council members are making recommendations that are reflective of their communities. But you do run into these occasions, and in those occasions, well, then the rest of the body should just say, well, no, it's to the rest of the city's benefit, to the borough, to our community's benefit to move forward with this, what's being proposed in this project, right? Instead of like, we have a housing emergency, but you're saying no. Mm-hmm. We have a housing emergency, but we have all these empty buildings everywhere. It's hard to take. And then coming back to the community board and community engagement, it's very hard to sell the community board to people that have other things to do and know a little better. They're like, wait a second, I went to that community board meeting, I spoke a whole bunch and nothing ever happened. Mm-hmm. Or the community board tried, but then they ran into nonsense. As opposed to having a more kind of on the level process, all the way through, then people would engage because they would make changes. Like we've had recommendations that like a community member that's come once made a suggestion and the table was like, oh, that's a good idea, and incorporated it. Not every time, but sometimes. So it does, like the board is responsive to those things and the projects do improve, right? Like, I like making fun of Candy on this, because Candy made a building gray instead of brown. Just an offhand comment. But she just said, we have too many brown buildings. Building's gray. The whole building.
And she used the 197.
Right. Like the one we have is really nice, but the city doesn't pay attention to it. It's unfortunate. It's really well done, but they don't care. So anyway, so like they can do stuff in this if they were really wanting to do it, that it's relatively easy and would achieve their stated goals. I do have a lot of pause from the conversation about in any way limiting the public process. And if they've moved on from that, great, but until I see it, you know, in black and white, I'm gonna be a bit apprehensive. Like they have a lot to do beforehand. You know, like we have sometimes seen applications before they certify, a little bit more recently but it's usually a month or two.
Yeah.
We've had some instances where it's a year and change.
Yes.
Where I forget the name of that form, the initial form that a developer submits to DCP to engage them in the first place, I forget what the hell it's called. And we got one of them way at the very beginning, 2 years. So we were talking with the developer and DCP for a while before it even came to us. But that's like one time I've seen that. More recently, it's been like a couple of months, you know, and it's really up to the developer. Like Ascendant is great about it. Right? They just keep coming, but the rest of them, you know, don't. And all that to say that we only see it once it's certified and we get it. So to say that we're the ones holding it up, I think is absurd. We're not.
Sure.
It's interesting, the issue of member deference, because if I recall, you know, I would say for the most part, that it happens. I think there was that maybe one time, I think it was Ben Kalos, was it? And it was the blood center place. So I'm not sure why there's a big concern about member deference when, you know, of all this in the past number of years, that one time it happened. And why is that such a big concern now?
I think it's the reverse. The reverse is that projects are changed to reduce housing or to make smaller or somehow meet the need of or requirement of the local council member. And so they list projects that got smaller or somehow got less housing because the council member required it.
Okay.
And it happens more in the outer boroughs of Manhattan. It really doesn't happen in Manhattan.
I just want to make a comment that, the 197, the state really does take weight to that when you do a proposal, they really do.
Yeah.
And they really listen to that, and that's how they help you out with the development and all that kind of stuff, because they know that you're speaking about what is in your community, what is the need, because they have an assessment done. And they take that to weight more value than what the city would take us for, take for granted here. They actually pay attention to that. Maybe it's because they're upstate and we're downstate and we're talking about what's happening in our neighborhood and how they can be more helpful. So that helps a lot, it gives a lot of leverage. And I've used the 197, and even when we're doing something else, they ask. And so it's easy to just throw it in there.
So if I may, just to follow up on that, in other jurisdictions in New York State, they have a comprehensive plan. And any action needs to go through what they call a comp plan consistency process. If you're gonna do something, it has to be consistent with your comprehensive plan, and if it's not, you either don't do it or you amend your comprehensive plan, right? You just can't get these projects that come in, where is this coming from, right? And that can't get approved without a process amending the plan. And so that's common in New York State, right? That's the way it works in New York State. It is not the way it works in New York State.
Right, but they should have consideration for what the work we've done. And
Absolutely.
to discuss that. And thank you for that.
Happy.
Thank you, George.
All right.
Next steps, I really recommend that you attend the event on July 7th. I myself is it in person or remote? Thank God. I'll be there. And June 9th, and we'll.
July.
I'm sorry, it's, like I said, 4 a.m. July 9th. So.
Well, I mean, Chair, I think we can table the next thing, just given time
I
constraints.
love your reaction, because you can read my mind.
Right, we're also waiting for a response from them, so.
And respectfully, right, so our vice chair did some homework for us, was able to obtain this case. We're not gonna have too much discussion of it, so just take your homework home, read it, and we'll chat about it next month, because, you know, I'm hoping the resolution start drafting it now. So having discussions about, that the phone system, start having that discussion of whether or not we support, don't support the project. Again, if we approve it, I don't necessarily concern myself with the conditions. If we reject it, we will not be there without conditions. So let's ensure that we have some, if there's any interest in that path. Again, not moving anyone vote or position, because I don't know where I'm at today on it. So, so we'll table the last item, and then, everyone already beat me to the punch on the planning thing, which I was thinking about for new business because of some of the conversations that have been happening on record by other members interested on things that are happening with hospitals and, all these ways to leverage, developers in the area to have conversations with the board that board members are a part of their cabs, right? So, the point is that some people are misinformed, and I think that the executive committee, particularly chair and vice chair, needs to have some more discussion with some of the members widely in the board, because I'll forward the emails to you guys so you can see. Again, it's just point of information, because the interest is for us to start having more discussion towards planning in the midst of us approving your loops, chasing landmarks, and being informed about charter revisions. Yes, Jessica?
Just a quick question, Angel, the intern working on the housing,
Yeah, he reported to housing this month.
okay. We'll watch that recording, thank you.
Yeah, he did good.
Is he still here, or is he?
No, that he's done.
Okay.
Want to do roll call?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Members, when I call your name, please answer present. Kenneth Crouch. Present. Jessica Elliott.
Present.
Jessica, Jill Jones.
Present.
I did that before. No, Rama. I need to watch that show. No, Rama. Beverly Pabon.
Present.
Derek Stampone. Present. Jesse Villanueva.
Present.
Candy Vasquez.
Present.
We have.
Excellent. Thank you. Meeting's adjourned at 48.
Thank you.
Thank you all. for your efforts.
Jessica.